Good evening and welcome to our 6 Feet Apart discussion. Tonight, I am greatly honored to have some awesome gifts with us again. This time we are visiting the medical field itself, and I have some professional gifts here with me tonight that are very astute in what they do. They're very clear, and they're very, all of them have been in this field for an extended period. They give us tremendous comfort here at Crown because as I share the spiritual word, then we expect people to obey what the Word of God says. But as these people give us input from a perspective that Bishop Bush is not very familiar, then certainly we use their word as law, because this is their professional response to life. And it is their job to know specifically how we are to conduct ourselves in the midst of this pandemic. Tonight, as we prepare our hearts to get started, I'm going to begin by asking each of these gifts, these very special gifts, to introduce themselves and to tell you a little bit about what they do, their specific area of expertise. And as we hear what they have to say, then we're going to come back and talk about some of the things that you and I need to really pay serious attention to throughout the rest of this exchange. Praise the Lord. Well, sisters, I'm so honored tonight. Glad that you're here with me. It gives me a great deal of comfort to be surrounded by gifts who are more familiar with this virus than Bishop is. I do not pretend ever to be an expert on matters that don't pertain to my career path. And so tonight, if you would, starting with to my left, if you would, please kind of just turn and face the television screen and introduce yourself to our listeners.
My name is Verita Johnson, and I've been a member here at Crown for probably going on 30 years.
Verita Johnson?
Verita Johnson.
Okay.
And my focus of nursing, I'm actually a marketer. So I actually conduct assessments at bedside for an inpatient rehab in Augusta, specializing mainly in neuro, medically complex plastics, vascular patients. So I'm typically either at the hospital bedside assessing patients in the home setting. So it's
So you work between the hospital and the home?
I'm primarily stationed at Augusta University. So
Okay.
that's where I do
The majority of it.
95% of the assessments that I complete for the inpatient.
Okay.
But we do have external marketers that are in the home setting, doctor's offices, dialysis, inpatient hospital, doctor's offices. But I am primarily stationed inside of a hospital.
Okay, thank you. All right, sis?
All right, I'm Paulette Hazel, and I'm a registered nurse at Augusta University Health in the Women's Health Department now. I just started this job in January of 2020, which is less direct contact with patients. And I've been nursing for 30 years, and that kind of changed a little bit from being, I don't have that much contact with patients.
So you've moved, you're not as involved with the individuals themselves as you once were?
I wasn't. I'm not now.
Okay.
But this time, they needed nurses in take care of patients, so I was what they call deployed.
Okay. Oh, so
out
you were
into
deployed
the hospital,
all right.
to see,
Okay.
help with the patients.
Understand. Beautiful. Okay, young lady on my left, on my right, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Guinea. I am a member of Crown Kingdom Christian Center. I've been with for a very long time. I am a nurse manager on my job. I work for Rural Health Services, and I've been a nurse 38 years. Before
38
then,
years.
yeah, before then I was.
Would you say that again?
Medical
You've been,
assistant.
go back, some of that kind of cut out.
Okay, I work for Rural Health Services in Aiken, and I'm a nurse manager. And I've been a nurse 38 years, and living through this pandemic.
Living through this pandemic, praise God. Okay.
Hi, I'm Renee. I'm Renee Inslee,
Okay. Now, wait a minute. It's not, now try it one more time. It's amazing how these microphones work excellent prior to getting started, and then all of a sudden we face this. I guess the Bible says the kingdom is always under assault, but the violent take it by force. We're going to stay with this thing tonight until we get these microphones working in excellence. Okay, go ahead, Renee.
I'm Renee Inslee, and
Just change your direction on it some.
I've been a nurse for 15 years.
There you go.
University Hospital on a med-surg pulmonary floor. I've been a member of Crown Kingdom Coaching Center for,
We're not hearing you. Okay, just, yeah. That's good. Now try it.
hello,
Shake it. Okay, there you go.
Hello. Okay, I'm Renee Inslee, and I've been a member of Crown Kingdom Culture Center for 15 years. I'm a licensed practical nurse. I work at University Hospital. I work on a med-surg pulmonary floor. I've been a nurse for 15 years.
Okay, so as you can see, I'm surrounded by nurses tonight, and so we're going to find out tonight what are some of the things that's been happening on the front line, wherein these young ladies have been called to appear and to attend to the needs of others, even while their families were at home. So all of you, first question I want to ask tonight, did all of you continue to work throughout this exchange?
Yes.
Yes.
How were you affected by the fact that you had to continue going to work while everyone else got a chance to be quarantined? Would you like to start, Renee?
I guess being a nurse, you're just going to do your job, and it's just a normal routine for you to just go to work. And even though everybody else was home, and I would leave and say, wow, I'm the only one to have to go to work and stuff like that, and everybody was home. But it was a challenge.
It was a challenge.
Yeah, it was a
So
challenge.
now, when you were going to work, were you getting exposed to any patients directly?
Yeah.
Now, how did that affect the transition from work to home? What did you do? What are some of the things that you had to do immediately?
My family would set up like a station for me when I come in from the garage. They would have the garage door open. I would strip down, change clothes there, and then go upstairs and bag up my clothes in the garage and take a shower and just stay away from everybody else. Because I've been exposed a couple times.
So you have been exposed a couple of times. Okay. Wow. Well, you hold that right there. We're going to, Verita, so you were not dealing directly with people, but you were handling their paperwork.
Right. So essentially, our first dealing with the pandemic involved us not being able to go into the hospital.
Okay.
So generally, as a marketer, your ability to make a face-to-face contact, your ability to persuade people to take advantage of your services is really my line of nursing. Our census at a max of 60, which we typically run anywhere from 55 to 60, within the first 2 weeks took about a 20 patient drop.
Wow. Is
We-
that, and you attribute that largely to your inability to do face-to-face?
And the fact that in the beginning, physicians were encouraging patients to go home because they felt
Okay.
like home was the safest place. But people didn't stop having strokes. They didn't stop having amputations. They didn't stop needing our services.
Okay.
It was just that I think until there was a better understanding of the CDC and what's required on our end as a provider of services. The first initial thought is you're safer at home.
Okay, that was the first initial thought.
That you're
Now, you
safer
did
at
say
home.
something interesting. It didn't, even though COVID-19 was initiated and a high level of alarm was sounded, it did not stop heart attacks and strokes and all of the other.
Didn't stop any of those, right. So those patients were not, discouraged is probably not the right word, but, you know, they were encouraged to be in their own home setting.
Okay,
That doesn't mean that everything was still able to be managed there, because the deficits were still there. You weren't getting home health services because nurses were not going into the home. So there was a gap, you know, in the services that were provided.
okay,
And initially, like I said, we were removed from Augusta University and University, wherever we had nurse liaisons, sent to Walton, which is where I am home-based, I guess. We did that for about 2 weeks. And like I said, our census took about a 20-person drop.
okay.
So then we were then quarantined, we were then flexed at
So
home.
then you were flexed, okay.
So we worked from home.
So, Emma, how were you affected? Let's go from the immediate impact from the way that you were accustomed to dealing with patients. Did that change? Then all of a sudden now you are having to shift priorities? Is that it? A good way of saying it?
It did change when the pandemic first was announced. Patients were not allowed to actually come inside the building.
Okay.
We
Which
had
patients? Is that all patients?
all patients.
Okay.
Because you never know, you know, who's affected. And we did have a little survey they had to fill out. And if they checked yes to certain things, then that's when I had to get involved.
Okay.
The staff would give it to me. Well, first of all, they send the patient to the car, and then they would give it to me. I had to call the patient, talk to the patient, then I talked to the provider. And we're going to send that patient home.
Okay.
And so we started doing more telehealth than actually the patients coming in. Then patients want to see the doctors.
Right. Patients do want to see the doctor.
Sorry, y'all. Patients want to see their doctors. So what we found out is they wasn't really telling a lot of truth.
Oh, so they started to kind of hold
Check
it
and
back.
note everything.
Oh,
Then when they get in to see the provider, and when the provider begin to talk with them, then it will come out, we're going to have to test this patient. Well, in our facilities, we have 3 facilities. Only the nurses can do the testing. The medical assistants can't. So I find myself dressing up in all the gear, testing patients for COVID.
okay.
Yeah.
And usually a lot of these patients have actually, we won't say they lied, but they kind of falsified some of the information so that they could get in front of the doctor themselves.
Yes, they didn't tell the truth.
Now, it's always been noted that patients go to med centers and doctors' offices because they want to see their
They wanna
physician.
see their primary-
Some of my greatest disappointments have probably come before COVID-19 when I would visit a place and then someone else comes to see me. Sometimes even an assistant wasn't sufficient, especially when your confidence is in the actual physician and in their
Absolutely.
care, the way they render their care. So you found this to be a big deal, finally, watching how people responded. They really needed to see their physician so that they could make some determinations about whether or not they were secure.
That's true, yeah.
Okay. Well, how were you affected, Paulette?
Well, basically, I am a grandmother, and I have custody of 3 of my grandkids.
Okay.
And in the beginning, when we didn't know all the details and everything, I, had to let them stay with someone else. until, we figure out, what was really going on. So that was probably the major effect I had. And the next one was, we, in women's health, we deal with the pregnant women, and they're the ones that really got panicky.
Women got very panicky.
Yes, because
I guess they had to really concern themselves with whether or not they could get infected once they went into a facility for checkup, and then they needed to be checked up. They didn't know whether they wanted to be checked up. Is that it? Or
mostly it was someone was working and
Okay.
working around other people.
Okay.
And getting afraid of being affected, so they were calling, wanting to get work excuses to get out of work, or
Okay.
because they're more compromised. Also, one of the more compromised patients is the pregnant women also. So the changes going on through that, when this first started, every hour we had emails coming in, and there were different changes in each email. You might do one thing this time, and then the next email was coming in, it was something totally different. So
it was a little rough in the beginning.
in the beginning, until it kind of settled out, and everybody started with the gloves, the hand sanitizing, the mask and stuff, and then it kind of.
So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, because I want us to deal with how the transition is affecting us now, and whether you all are, how you really feel people are dealing with that. But we're going to come back to that in just a moment. Now, let's go from this route. Here with me, you've been taught to walk and live by faith. So prior to COVID-19, the majority of you who were very faithful were already sort of insulated in faith. You understood that whatever challenges we would have to encounter, we overcome them by faith. For this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith. And so you understood faith was designed to assist us with invisible enemies. So you had that insulation, but then you were not in isolation. The difference in you all and us, you had to go where the action was. And every day you had to show up. So you were insulated, but then now you were not isolated like us. And since you were not isolated, you had to assimilate with the people who were having to transition through their fears on a daily basis. Now, how contagious was fear initially, even though you were trying to walk by faith? You're a nurse, and you got to get in there and handle this thing. And now you got, as Pauletta just said, you got family, you got children, you've got a spouse, some of you got grandchildren. And so what happened is, all of a sudden now, that comfort that you would have had if you could isolate is no longer there. How were you? Em, I want to hear from you first. What are some of the things that you noticed immediately in that transition? Okay. And were you ever really just frightened?
I was never frightened.
Okay.
And I think, piggybacking off Verita, we're nurses.
So
we're used to things just happening.
Okay.
And we get in there and we take care of it. But you come home and you have to hear, who were you around today?
Okay, there you go.
What happened? You test somebody, was anybody positive? Mama, you sound like you got a cough. What's going on here?
Okay.
So you had to deal with a lot of that in the home. So you end up trying to make the home as comfortable.
Okay.
As well as you go to work, and you still have members who you supervise, and they are afraid, but they got to work.
Yeah.
And we just did the best we could.
So you had to do some level of physical comfort at home, like Renee, and then you had to adjust yourself to go back to work. And you said you would often have to put on all these garments so that you could do testing all day.
Yes.
The family wanted to know who had you tested, how many tests, were there any positive tests? Mm-hmm. Is there a possibility that you could have gotten something? And what do we need to do?
Yeah, it had gotten to the point where I said, well, the house is big enough. If I come in contact with anyone, I can be secluded.
Okay.
They told me, no, ma'am, you got to go.
They said you can't even come home.
They said I couldn't come home. But,
Oh, wow.
yeah, but we have a lot of fun and a
Yeah.
lot of jokes in our home, but they were serious.
I know they were serious.
They were serious. But still, in the midst of it all, I can say, and because of the correct PPEs that we were wearing, the masks, the gloves, and the sanitizing and washing and all that, we didn't have any positive cases at my site.
Awesome. Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, have you all noticed the heightened level of sanitization and cleanliness? Are you really seeing that, or is it something that's kind of just masked? Is it real? Is everyone actually engaging in the sanitization systems and keeping their hands clean and doing the things that they're supposed to do, or are we really lapsing? What are you seeing most frequently?
Well, in my appointment, they come in the hospital before they walk in. They were taking temperatures at the door of nurses and patients.
Okay.
Then they would give them a mask, and they had to sanitize their hands before.
So they
walked
had
in
to
the building.
sanitize. So you make sure, this is what I'm talking about. So you're actually assuming responsibility for their accountability.
Right,
Making
correct.
sure that people who are going to be going in and out of the system
Yes.
are sanitized
Yes.
correctly.
Right, and also they was limiting visitors with the patient. Only the patient could come in at
Okay.
one point. Now they've extended it with one visitor with the patient. But in the beginning, it was the patient had to come in. Even me working in women's health, you always come in, you have the spouse with you because you're having a baby or whatever.
Right.
That was totally taken away too. The spouse couldn't come in with the patient. She had to come in by herself.
Okay.
So that was one of the difficult things we had to deal with also, because of course they're going to get upset, and we had to deal with that.
Wow. So now let me go here first. Has any of you had to deal directly, let's say from a family perspective, with someone that has been exposed to COVID-19?
My mother is a essential worker as well. She's a certified nursing assistant at a nursing home, and she actually, called me, and she was like,
It's clear.
"Don't be alarmed." That's how she started it, and I was like, "Okay." And she said there was some cases throughout her nursing home where she works. She was tested, and she actually had positive results.
Okay. Now, I know you're going to walk me through this, but she had positive results, and she said to you, don't be alarmed.
Don't be alarmed.
But when you heard her speech afterwards, she said, don't be alarmed. You knew then immediately what?
Well, I guess in my household, and she is of a similar faith.
Okay.
We were not really alarmed.
Okay. All right. Good.
And back to what Emma was saying, I work on a team of different personalities, and I had to isolate myself from work.
Okay.
There were nurses that were every 2 seconds. There's 4 cases. There's 6 cases. There's 2 cases here. There's 8 cases. And I'm
So
like,
they were frantic because they were spending their time finding out, discovering. Okay.
And I'm like, you know what? I cannot be consumed with TV and news because you're not getting the full story. And
Okay.
of course, just like with everything else, they're showing the worst cases because there are people who survive it. There are people who thrive afterwards. But the cases that you're hearing about are, from a 0 to 10, they're the 12s.
Wow.
They're not.
So
like
they
my
play up the
mother-
fear.
So like my mother, her only, I would say, thing that has still continued with her is her taste buds changed, which is
Okay.
one of the things that they said was a kind of identifier.
So one of the symptoms were that her taste
Her
buds
taste buds.
changed.
So everything is tasting more metallic-y, kind of like a funny taste to her. But as far as to look at her, to talk to her, because we talked to her several times a day, and I will say that she and I were not panicked, but my children were panicked because they
Okay.
love their grandmother. So they were like, "You can't go to work. You can't do such and such. You know," and she automatically had to do the 10-day quarantine.
Okay.
So she wasn't going to be going to work. But on the 11th day, she went to work.
She went back to work.
She said,
Dedicated.
She said, if it's going to take me, it's going to take me doing what I love. It's gonna
You
take me-
see what kind of
working.
sacrifice dedicated soldiers are committed to. And that's why we ought to always applaud them for their efforts. I mean, tireless commitment, unwavering commitment. They're always doing whatever it takes to get the job done. I like what you said earlier, Emma. You said as nurses, we're already accustomed to just seeing what the case is and just putting on our gloves and getting in there and doing whatever it takes to get the patient back to health. And so that's what you had to do here. Now, your children, they're still being perplexed by this thing, right? Are they concerned about return or mom?
I think in my case personally, because Paulette was speaking of her grandchildren, I went from kids in college to kids who were at home.
Okay.
They came home. I have 2 children in college, and it was a household adjustment because it was just me and one daughter. Then it went to me and 2 daughters.
Wow.
And then it went to me and 2 daughters. And then so it went to all of us having to share
The same
this
space.
And, you know, my youngest daughter struggled with online school because that is not her forte. That is
Okay.
not where she thrives.
Now, your kids are all thriving scholastic. They're very academic. All of them have always been, we
They
mark them
are-
here at church because of their, go ahead.
But my youngest is certainly not an online schooler because
Not
that
an
is
online school.
completely different. So I went back to, did you do that today? Was that turned in today? And she got back to saying, don't talk to me. Can you say something other than school? I'm like, because then you're not in class.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of like you're not going because you're not in class. And so to keep them disciplined, and it was not peer pressure for them. It was not anything. It was that they felt like they were not in school.
Okay.
Even if they don't like being in school, you could at least go.
Gotcha.
And now you can't go.
Right.
That was her point, because when she goes, she's like, I don't like it here. I don't like anything about it. I don't like it. Even though she academically does well, when
Yes.
she didn't have a choice and it was stripped from her to
Yeah.
then not go. And initially I kind of thought, okay, they're younger, they're young adults because they're, 26 and 25 and 19. I'm like, I don't really know how this is going to go.
Okay.
Because it's been a long time since we've all.
So I don't know if you all hear what I'm hearing, but her concern became more about life at home because the school has now dumped everybody back in the house. And it's happened at a hurried pace without any warning. And it's almost as if like you lie down tonight and you got this life that you've planned, plotted, scheduled, and everything is just going so smooth. And tomorrow morning you wake up without. Okay.
Literally, everybody came home with everything. So it's like you had to move out. I'm like, they're not even gonna let you leave your stuff there. So now one house became
Oh boy,
6.
I can imagine. I can imagine. That is really something.
But I will say the plus side to it, I didn't realize they could get along so well.
There you go.
I was like, they were cooking together and laughing
See?
together and I'm in there looking at them like, are these mine?
Beautiful.
And
Beautiful.
so that's really, I was telling them, I said, that'll be the one takeaway from COVID that no one else can take from me.
Beautiful.
That I know that they can get
They
along.
can get along.
They can thrive.
They can thrive. Beautiful. Renee, so did you see anything similar? Have you had to encounter anything from this perspective?
Well, at home, nothing has changed as far as at home because we all together. And
Try it another. Yeah. Now your mic was excellent before we started.
Hello?
There you go.
Nothing has changed as far as at home because we're a close-knit family and we all live together. So it wasn't nobody that was coming in as far as that wasn't there. My experience was
Just, yeah, let's turn it like that or do something different. No. Yeah. Hold it like this, do something. Just try it. Talk, it's going to come on.
as far as being more in the hospital, the challenges was there. There was challenges at home because not like Emma so much, but they would say, so what's going on? And
Wait a minute. So when you would come home from work, they would want to know details.
they would want to know details as far as what happened and how's it going. They would tell me what the CDC said.
So they were getting all the insight from TV.
So I had to tell them what was going on as far as saying, yes, that's true, but, they would say about the mask. And I would say, yeah, but you can't do that as far as the mask. And yeah, they said this and they said that.
Let's try it one more time. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hello. And so I would have to tell them, no, that's not so. We're doing this and we're doing this way. So the challenges was the times when I would come home and they were actually almost scared to come near me.
Okay.
They would go one way or I would go this way and oh my goodness, don't you think you need to do this? And nurses are dying from it and the hot doctors are dying from it and so you need, I think it was kind of like they was paying attention to what was going on. So even though they had faith, but fear was kind of starting to set in.
Okay.
But I wasn't afraid because like the rest of them said, we're exposed to infections all the time. We're exposed to tuberculosis. We're exposed to a lot of infection all the time. So this where, at the first beginning where the nurses, everybody made a joke out of it. They was laughing about it when it first started. And then I start noticing when we start kind of getting cases, our first case and second case, you can see the fear of the nurses because we had to go in the rooms now. We had to dress in full gear and N95 mask. And so now it's like we do team nursing on my floor. So it was like, well, no, if they're going to do that, then let's split it. You go to tomorrow and I'll go today, where you can start seeing now the fear starting to set in and nobody wanted to go in the rooms where you had to go in the room. You had to go in there and then day shift might have forgot to do something. Now you're in the room so many times and they're saying you can't wear the mask but 5 times in, or within 8 hours. So you had to mark the bags and make sure that you walked in there. This is the first time, this is the second time, or staying there as less as possible, And then, so that was my challenge, yeah.
That was your biggest challenge. So now, as far as interacting with the crew is concerned, does it ever get to a point where you start to feeling like, wait a minute, I don't know how long we're going to be able to hold up as a team? Did you ever encounter any of that through this? You did? Let's talk about that a little bit. You should be good.
Okay. Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I first started, like I said, I started this job in January.
Oh,
and
you started this job in January. Okay.
This is the one I am on now. And everybody was just so nice to each other. You come in the morning, they come and give you a hug and
Okay.
everything. But now, since this has happened, it's been a disaster. I mean, you see the difference in them. They're more complaining and kind of more separated now. And I've noticed that, but I'm basically away from all of them.
Okay.
So, but
So
know,
you've seen the relational breakdown, though,
Yes,
as
I
far
have.
as,
I
and it's
have.
not so much as personal as much as it is fear.
I think it's fear, and it's just not it's not fear of the virus. I think just because we didn't know what was going on in the beginning, and that's one fear of the unknown sometimes.
Okay, so the ignorant factor is a big deal as well.
Right.
Just don't know
And
what's.
like I said in the beginning, it was one thing, and then an hour later, it was something else, and it was pretty tense at that time in the beginning. Then we started having to call patients and tell them to stay home. Had to decide which one's going to be seen and which ones can't be seen, So that was one of the problems too, because some of the nurses had to call and tell the
Okay.
patients not to come in. And
So now let me ask you all this, and you can think about how you want to address this for a moment while I'm talking, because I really want to know, the states are being opened up now. The governor of Georgia opened up, state of Georgia. Now I think the state of South Carolina has been opened up. And we're wondering if we're handling this virus the way that we really should be. What is your mindset towards this? How do you think we should be progressing at this point? You got any thoughts on that at all?
Well, one thing is, I think we're opening up too soon.
So you do think we're going
I
too
do.
fast?
I think we're going too fast because a lot of people didn't social distance. I mean, I could ride through my neighborhood up the street and I see a bunch of folk together, 15, 20 gentlemen playing basketball, but you're supposed to be social distancing. But one thing about it too is when you go in the stores, everybody don't have on masks.
Right.
I try to go early on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. Got to change when we come back to church, though, Bishop. But, I try to go when there are least amount of people. But the one thing Verita was talking about, the numbers. I do watch the numbers, okay? But it does not, I don't see it negatively.
So you see that you watch the numbers, but you don't see it negatively.
I do not because, like today was a very somber day. There are over 100,000 people
right.
now who has passed with this disease. So I do watch the numbers because when I look at the numbers of the ones that have died versus the ones who are still alive, all right, that gives credits to applause for the ones who've made it. But when the numbers keep creeping up, that let you know that this virus is not under control.
Okay.
And the danger of this virus is definitely still there. And we have to be careful.
So the dangers of this virus are still there,
Yes.
and we need to be as cautious now as we were initially
Yes.
until we have more insight.
Until we have more insight. A lot about this virus was unknown. How
Correct.
to treat it.
Correct.
That's why a lot of people was afraid. So since we don't know how to
Say that again, the first
I
part.
said a lot of knowledge about this virus was unknown, that it wasn't known how to treat it. There was no medication you could give. Regardless of what you've heard on the television, there is no medication
Wow.
that you can give to say it's cured. Everything is in a test mode.
Okay.
And no telling when we will, if we will, find out exactly what medication you can get to help you with this particular virus. So the best known things I've heard, I don't know about you ladies, is social distancing.
Okay.
Doing all the correct things. Keep them hands washed. Keep your mask on. different things like that. Even one last thing, Bishop, even with family members. Now, this is one of the things with my husband is he's such a social butterfly with his family.
Okay.
He misses his family, and he wants to go visit with his family. And I'm like, you don't know where they've been. You don't know what they've been doing.
Right.
And we do love them,
Yes,
know.
I
But
understand.
still, because I love my brother who's in California, he comes home today. I don't know what my brother's been doing in California. So I have to social distance myself.
That's correct. So it sounds like then social distancing until we get more insight, better information, is the new vaccine.
That's it.
And I do want to say to the church community, especially, that this is a season where we really need to be praying for a vaccine, believing God for a vaccine. Not that God does not do miraculous things, etc. We're not talking about miracles. We need something. I say all the time that the majority of the church world lives in the outer court. And for that reason, we need a remedy that will serve the entire world from a carnal, natural perspective more so than we do spiritually. And that's why we've got to pray. In this season, God says, if my people called by my name would humble themselves and pray. It's very important for us to pray in this season and pray specifically for a vaccine. Until then, it sounds like, again, social distancing and sanitization is the new vaccine until we know more. Now, how have you all interfaced with I think there's a rule that says that you've got about 6 seconds, is it, or something like that, when you're... It changes. If that changes also, talk to me. See, because one day it's like you can be in the same environment but not share the exact same space for, 6 to 10 seconds or something like that. Then the next thing you know, so talk to me. Give us some insight on what we're facing there.
I think initially, and I'm in
That's good.
total agreement with probably the majority of the nurses here, is that it is too soon.
It is too soon.
I think primarily I have a couple of sorors who are nurses, a couple sisters in my sorority, and we do not live in the same, that we live in the same state, in different counties, and where they live, you lifted the ban 2 weeks ago, but I'm still under the ban.
Okay.
In North Carolina, you lifted the ban 4 weeks ago, but I'm still under the ban. So there has not really been a consistent time where we all start and say, okay, starting Monday, every, city in South Carolina, every, principality is going to do social distancing for the same amount of time. Because if I start today, and then my 2 weeks is up next week, and then there's a case in Columbia, and then they start again, but I've been there. So some of the, so we can't really pinpoint one time where, like, Georgia's already opened up. I live in South Carolina. I work in Georgia. So when AU opened up, South Carolina was not open. I mean, we were.
Okay.
So when AU opened back up their visitation or their access to vendors, which has probably been about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks, 2 weeks now, I said to my supervisor, I said, is this the best thing for us to do?
And your supervisor said?
According to the CDC, that's everybody's statement that
Okay.
starts.
So we're all using the CDC.
According to the CDC, it's safe
It's
that
safe.
you go back in. So we were told there are certain checkpoints that we can only go in. Our temperatures would be taken. We would be provided masks, and we would then sanitize, our hands. Go only to the patient's room that you need to see, and leave.
So only go to the patient's room?
Only go to
So-
the
okay.
patients that I have permission to see. Part of marketing is that you talk to the case manager, you talk to the social worker, you talk to the nurse, you talk to the therapist.
Okay.
Because again, you're trying to generate business. You didn't
Right.
say it, but
But
you're
now you just go straight to the patient and get out.
So the rule became, you go do that one particular thing, but I, stand, clear to the rules. And like today, we got a referral on a patient who actually, is COVID recovered. That's how we refer, to patients that, have had negative testing, COVID recovered. And, I was willing to go to the floor and get the necessary paperwork. Right now, they're not allowing visitors on the COVID floor, at AU. That's the only floor that they're not allowing visitors.
So they're not allowing visitors on the COVID floor.
Correct.
They never have allowed visitors on the COVID floor, though, right?
Right, well, the visitation just started back, I think, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? It's been
think
within
it
the
was
last 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Within the last 2 weeks?
No visitors allowed
Okay.
at all. So at Walton, we have maintained the no visitation.
Okay.
We're
Sticking to the regulations.
but the CDC's, I guess, the same. You can have one visitor per family, and the visitor has to stay in the room that entire time. But if you've got one nurse with 6 patients, how do they know if the visitor stays in the room the whole time? I mean, you're not like going in there like.
Check that again, because I'm not sure we're really hearing. Here's another mic. Get this one.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Is it on?
Is it on? Yeah, it is.
Okay.
So, basically, the CDC, I guess, has now reviewed, and you're allowed one visitor.
Wait, say that from the beginning.
You're allowed.
The CDC.
You're allowed, number one, for vendors to enter back into the hospital setting, and they're basing that on the numbers. They're basing that on the fact that the cases have trended in a downward slope. Not
Okay.
that there are not any cases, but they feel like we've kind of hit that
Ceiling.
ceiling. Now we're going to plateau.
Okay.
So we're going to slowly open back up these areas that have been closed. Because as far as my job is concerned, Augusta University has been closed to us since March, since
Okay.
really the beginning of the pandemic.
But now, wouldn't it seem strange that the consideration needs to be given to the fact that we are reopening society, and we haven't given ourselves time yet to adjust to what can happen? It's almost as if we're failing to anticipate a revival of this.
Exactly. So I
this-
think that's why we needed this little bit of time when the numbers on a downward trend to just
Retool, is that it? Is-
just kind of stick with the social distancing.
Okay.
Stick with the hand sanitizing. Stick with the no contact.
Okay.
And so that way we can actually go back and look at the data and say XYZ happened, and we went 2 more weeks without it, and so the cases went down. So maybe we're now on a downtrend. But it was kind of like, oh, it went down by 4 cases. Let's visit.
So let me ask you all this.
Let's
Is it, have you noticed that when people, I won't say experiment, but they socialize and they gather and they violate the rules, but they get by with it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times? Is it almost as if now you can't tell those people that this isn't a hoax or a myth, or that they really don't have anything to worry about, because they feel to some degree that their experience has taught them that the government is using some kind of conspiracy and trying to drive fear into their hearts so that they really don't get out to socialize the way they do. You all see anything there? Is there any real concern there? She's got your mic.
Well, I'm going to say yes, because as you notice, when they open up all these beaches, and if you notice just over the weekend, how crowded those places were. Nobody was social distancing, and apparently those are probably some of the people that you just described, the ones that been there 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and nothing happened. So they're feeling that, it's time we can get on back out now. And like Emma was saying that, I look at the numbers too, and especially at the numbers from last week, and we're going to see about next 10 days to see what happened just with these people that actually went out and did all these activities this weekend at the beaches and bars or wherever they were going. And if we'll see if it stays the same, good. But just got a feeling that we're going to see something.
Got a feeling we're going to see something a little different.
A little different.
Now, see, that's interesting because this is why I'm trying to get some input from you all, because it's almost as if you do get a sense. I think we rode downtown once or twice, and there were very crowded areas, almost as if there were never any regulations given. And as a result of that, it seemed like people were saying, we really don't believe this, that the only people that's going to be affected by it are the people that's going to be affected by it. And we're not the ones, we're immune to it. So, I mean, how is that coming? Do you all think that in a short time, you mentioned, let me go this way. So you mentioned that in about 10 days or so, we'll see. Are you saying that there's an adjustment period after the exposure before we can detect? Is that what we're dealing with?
It is, for the most part, 2 to 14 days, you can be asymptomatic.
Okay, now that's what I want you to explain right there. Talk to me about
That means that, and ladies, y'all feel free to help me. That means you show no signs and symptoms.
Now, you've been out playing basketball with me,
Yeah,
and everything is apparently normal.
yes.
Okay, keep going.
But the disease itself have already been transpired, has been given to you. You
Transferred,
have it.
okay.
Transferred, I'm sorry, to you, but you don't know you have it. So when she's talking about those 10 days, after a certain amount of days, then you may start feeling a little sluggish. That's a mild case. Short of breath, no taste buds, fever. A lot of people have thought maybe they had the flu. No, you got COVID-19. Yeah.
And I also have to say that even like at the hospital I work in, where when it first started, we didn't do all what like AU was doing. We didn't do the temperature. We didn't do that. We just started doing the temperature for all the nurses coming in like in the last probably month. But we didn't do that at the beginning. So it was every day was something different. It went from wearing masks to you can't wear masks, no N95s. We're wearing gloves and double up gloves. I was telling Verita we're using hand sanitizer on gloves. This is stuff that we never
Using hand sanitizer on gloves?
Yes, this is stuff we was taught to do, and it's, now we can wear the gloves, and now you can wear the mask, and it's only certain masks, a surgical mask, and it went from that to 4 days I'm off, and then you come back, and it's something different. So now it's like everybody wearing masks now. So now they started within the last probably 2 weeks that when we come in, we get our temperature checked, but now we have to wear masks. So the patients as well as the staff have to wear masks all the time now. And we can change the masks when we get upstairs, the better ones. But the thing about it is you don't know who has it.
So now, aren't there new rules also about the mask as well? You can't wear the mask, but for so long, if you do keep the mask on, the mask can also cause some type of
Well,
problems?
the N95s those are the masks that was not available for
Okay,
the staff.
the N95s.
N95s, those are the ones that you need to wear in the negative pressure rooms where they keep the COVID patients at. And we didn't have that. So it was like you had it one day and all of a sudden we're like, what happened to it? It was just here yesterday. And I guess they went and everything went to the COVID floor. But now they're saying you can wear the surgical mask, which is the blue ones, and they're only really for if I have something. Like if I have a cold and I put the surgical mask on from you, so if I cough, it protects.
So it protects you from me.
If I have a cough and I'm coughing, the surgical mask, the one we walked in here with. But as far as like really stopping the virus from, it's going to go through the surgical mask. If you're in the midst of it, it will go right through that.
So if you're in the midst of it, it will go through the mask. That's why the social distancing aspect is so critical. Now, let's heighten a couple of things here before we bring this discussion to a close, because we really got to look at some things you all have said. We can actually take comfort in socializing closely, but we still never really know for the next, 2 to 10 days, if we've contracted something from an individual that we were in close proximity to. Once we start to feel in some type of symptoms, it can either be, come on, help me now, a loss of taste buds. Everything starts to tasting metallic. It can also be fever. It can also be cough,
Shortness of breath,
shortness of breath,
body aches.
general weaknesses. So these are things that we can sound so much like responds to respiratory infection, the flu.
It is a droplet. So it's not so much, so it's an airborne.
It's an airborne, so it's an,
So it's not like Renee said, if and I don't want to,
you good there, talking to it.
and I don't want to equate it to like catching a cold, but if you're in a house with people who have a cold, you may not get that cold right away.
Okay.
You may not get it at all because you've, got those antibodies.
Strong, okay.
So typically, what we've done in healthcare in the past is treated viruses with antibiotics, and you don't treat viruses with antibiotics because they then come back stronger.
You don't treat viruses with antibiotics because then they come back stronger.
If you have a cold and someone gives you azithromycin or they give you something and it's a cold, it's not going to help your cold. That is not how you treat a virus but because the past has been, give me an antibiotic for that, give me an antibiotic for my cold, give me an antibiotic for this. So the viruses themselves grow back stronger. They grow back more resistant to these antibiotics, which is why trying to find a cure for something, like if you take a flu vaccine, people that usually think, if I take a flu vaccine, I'm not going to catch the flu. That is not true.
That's not true.
Because there are so many different strands of a virus. It might protect you from 4 or 5 different, but there's 1,000.
See, now this is what I'm talking about. This is how I'm learning. I'm sitting here and I'm learning because, again, I think I know a lot until I hear from someone who knows a lot. And so it's always wise to listen, pay attention, and learn, because someone else, especially trained in this field, can give you an insight that may help you to regulate your caution in a way that you otherwise would not. I really think one of the things that we've learned from this panel discussion is how important it is that we do not take social distancing for granted, that we do not take sanitization for granted, that we do not take making sure that we eat properly, strong nutrition, keeping up our immune system. We cannot take that for granted. Am I right?
Correct.
And so, now, does exercise help?
If you do it, it does.
It does.
Exercise help. If you exercise, yes, that's going to help build up.
It's going to help build up your immune system.
Immune
at least.
system
Okay.
and all. But one other thing I wanted to say, because we were talking about that, if you're exposed to someone with the COVID-19, then you will have to go on quarantine for 14 days.
You got to quarantine 14.
You got to quarantine. If I had it and I expose you, you have to go on 14 days. Don't mean you're going to get it.
Okay.
But you need to quarantine for those 14 days to know if you will be exposed, so you won't go out and spread it to someone else.
So that's why if I'm in a group setting and all of us are interacting with each other, and we discover 5 days from now that that one of the persons in the group was, can I use the word host? Was a host or carrier. Now all of us, or each of us that were in that environment, need to quarantine ourselves a minimum of 14 days to see if we've contracted the virus.
Now, I've been exposed twice.
You say that again.
I've been exposed twice.
You've been exposed twice.
And my manager called me up and
Make sure that mic is on because we need to hear that.
my manager would call me up and say, I'm sorry, but you've been exposed, and they would name the patient and the time, and then so now you have to do a diary of your temperature every day. So you have to start taking your temperature for 14 days, and you can go to work now, but you still have, you can go to work, but you have to check your
Because you're
temperature.
essential personnel.
Yeah, because
Okay.
unless you start showing symptoms, you can come to work, check your temperature throughout the work, and once you finish the diary, you turn it to the manager. And so that's what we're talking about. Social distancing is so important because even at work, taking care of the patient, you don't know. We're in there half of the night, the whole shift, and then maybe 2 days later, they get tested because now they're testing everybody who has to have surgery. So if you have to have surgery, you're going to get tested, and that's how a lot of them are finding out now that they have it.
Well, here's what I want to
Any
do.
Any symptoms, though.
Wow. I want each of you, if you would, to look in the camera. And I want you to briefly give us something that we should think about, something that we should consider as you prepare to leave us, that we can hold on to in this season. Tell us something from your perspective that you think we need to know about this virus and how to secure ourselves in the midst of it. Starting with you, Farida, would you please face the camera and tell us?
I'm gonna say,
It's good. Your mic is good.
I think one of the things that when we were in nursing school, and which for me is not, because I've not been a nurse quite as long as these ladies, but certainly it was basically you can't judge a book by its cover. Just because you're looking at someone and they look healthy to you, and they aren't exhibiting signs and symptoms, and you get more relaxed. When I see patients, and I think as all of nurses here, we're taught to treat everybody as if you could potentially have something.
Treat everybody
Because
as if they could potentially have something.
every person who has cancer doesn't look like they have cancer. Every person that has diabetes doesn't look like they have diabetes. So I think the biggest thing in this pandemic is to just be cautious with everybody.
Thank you.
Treat, and it's unfortunate because that's how we're taught in nursing school. So if you are putting on your gloves with every patient and you're changing your gloves like you should be, and so if I go to see Emma and she looks healthy, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to put my gloves on because she looks fine.
So in other words, you're saying take nothing
For
for
granted.
granted. Okay, thank you so much. Paulette, would you please?
Well, yeah, to follow up on that as far as not taking anything for granted, because, we do have nurses that are working. You have parents that are both nurses and having to send their children other places. And if you continue going out doing what you regularly would do, this is going to continue, and, their kids are going to be with other people or somewhere else. So, if they can't think about, they're only thinking, most people are only thinking about themselves, what they want to do, what they want to go out and do and stuff like that, instead of, social distancing, and like you say, not taking it serious, because they went this place and nothing happened. They went this place and nothing happened.
So your word would be considerate,
Be considerate
of other people
of
as
other
well.
people as well, especially ones in the health field, because they're the ones that are, giving up a lot.
Okay.
They are. A lot of us are giving up some things, and our homes are not normal, or, just be considerate of others.
Okay. Emma.
Okay, you know, the Bible teaches us that obedience is better
Then
than sacrifice.
all day long.
And God also told us that his people, you know, we fail, we die, we don't get what we get because we don't have knowledge.
Yeah.
And we don't have understanding. So what I want to say is get you some knowledge about this COVID-19 and do what you are being told to do. If we're being told to just have social distancing between one another, do that. If we're told to wash our hands, do that. Whatever we're told to do, do. Because this virus don't care about your mama, your daddy, your sister, your brother, and nobody else. We have to protect ourselves, and we have to protect our families. Educate yourself.
Wow.
I would have to agree with the other nurses here on the panel and just say, regardless of what you may see people not doing as far as just going out and enjoying themselves, like Emma said, first look at the numbers. Because you have not experienced this up and close and you're not in the rooms taking care of these people, you're not watching these people on these ventilators, this is real. I don't care because it went up and down and people not understanding what's going on and the government it is real. We face it all the time. So please do what you have to do, but stay safe. Because like we said, we're putting our lives on the line. And it's not fair to us that we have to leave our families and not being able to be around them because you won't stay home and you won't do what you need to do.
Wow. Well, thank you all so much. I really do applaud your efforts tonight. Thank you for doing all that you could to reach us. I just simply want to say in closing, I keep hearing the echo of Proverbs chapter 1. The Bible says emphatically, a wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man who understands will attain unto wise counsels. But fools despise wisdom and instructions. I want to encourage you tonight, take everything that you've heard and use it for the good of yourself, for your family, and be considerate of the rest of the society around you. Remember, we're fighting an invisible enemy, and to know where the host is very difficult to discern. It's very important that we heed their instructions tonight, and let's all prepare ourselves to come out on the other side of this thing, knowing that God has kept us and that we have wisely conducted ourselves through this transition. Look, I look forward to seeing you on the other side of COVID-19, prosperous, healthy, and strong. The best you is yet to come. God bless you until we talk again. Praise God.